So today I want to talk about Request Network, which is a cryptocurrency project which seems to be very, very interesting. And what they want to do is payments and invoicing. But today I'm going to talk about exactly what problems they want to solve and how they're solving these problems, what their visions are, and their GitHub and their team. I'm going to make a little review of their project. So they are on CoinMarketCap, place 88. It's pretty good, but they have space to grow. So it's a very interesting project to look into, in my opinion. So let's look at the problems of what actually do they want to solve. And as I can see it, they want to solve two problems. And the first one is fees. So right now, when you make a transaction, especially like an international transaction, that has enormous amounts of fees. You look at PayPal, you have a 3%, almost 3% fee for making a transaction. And for Visa, you have a 1.5% fee. And that's not a fee that us as buyers see. Instead, it's something that the seller have to pay. But if you studied economics, you know that a fee on the seller is basically the same as a fee on the buyer, because the seller will just have to put forward that fee in order to make up the costs that come from the fee, right? So another problem with transactions is the data used in today's transactions. You have to put up your credit card number, right? Which is bad, and you have to put up your email, you have to put up your name, a lot of sensitive private information. And this comes with a risk, because if you put up your credit card number, somebody, a bad actor, could use that number and basically pump out resources from your bank account. And that's not a good thing. And there's also the thing with privacy that you give private information that companies actually sell to increase their bottom line. So that's the first problem, transactions. The second problem is accounting. And accounting is a very, very big industry. Maybe you don't know this if you're not, having your own company, but accounting is very expensive. The top 100 companies in the US, they paid $2.5 billion in external auditing fees. And that's just, a very, very small part of the accounting costs, because that's just the external auditing fees that you have to do every year. But then, the normal accounting fees cost even more, and you have to keep count of all the receipts and all the paper. So in summary, today accounting is expensive and it's time consuming. Entire departments for companies are dedicated to accounting. So changing this would be a very good idea, right? So the solution is, of course, Request Network. They want to solve both these problems. They want to solve the transaction fee problem and the accounting problem. And how do they do this? They use something called requests, which uses the blockchain to make transparent payment invoices. And that's basically the summary of what they want to do. They want to make digital invoicing. And today invoicing is mostly done with paper, or it's done with PDFs, which is very inefficient. Because there's no way of keeping track of that information, and it costs a lot of money to make that invoicing. Therefore, usually it's only companies that can pay with invoicing. So what does this look like with requests? So if you go to Amazon and you want to buy something, in the future you will have this button called Pay with Request. And then Amazon, you sign this with your public key, this Pay with Request thing, and then Amazon will send a request to you that you can choose to pay or not. And Amazon doesn't get any of your private information. They don't get your name, they don't get where you are. You can also not be paid for stuff without you accepting that, which is great. Today, if you give your credit card number, all of a sudden you can be paying for a subscription that you had no idea you would be paying for. But with this system, It's all transparent, it's all secure. And now you might say, wait a minute, you can do this with a lot of cryptocurrencies. You can do this with Raiblocks, you can do this with Ethereum. But what request network is not a currency. We have to keep that in mind. It's not a currency. Request network is a payment platform. And that payment platform is currency agnostic. And what does currency agnostic mean? Well, it means that you can pay with request with any currency, with any cryptocurrency. You can, for example, if I want to sell my skateboard, I might say that I want to be paid in Bitcoin, but then my friend can pay in Ether. And through request network, the Ether is swapped to Bitcoin. And request network is able to do this thanks to its partners, which are Kyber Network. And Kyber Network is another cryptocurrency project that makes instant swaps between tokens and currencies very easy to do. So request network is currency agnostic. And so then you might think, okay, why do we need this token? Why do we need the request token? Because request has a token. Basically, for every transaction, request tokens are burnt. They're burnt as a fee, which means that they disappear from the supply after you've done a transaction. You have to put in some request, and that request is then gone after the transaction. And this is really good for the people who hold the tokens, because when you decrease the supply of a token, then all the other tokens that are still in supply will increase in value because there is less supply but the same demand, right? And they also use this token in order to incentivize projects. So they have a fund of over $30 million that they will use to increase projects using request. So this invoicing, this digital invoicing on the blockchain is what is called the core layer. And the core layer is just the first part of request network. Now here comes the vision. And the vision is where people get really excited about this project. And the vision consists of two layers, the extension layer and the application layer. The extension layer is basically making more complicated transactions. So adding smart contracts on top of this invoicing. For example, invoices that has late payment fees. So if you don't pay within 30 days, automatically you have to pay more Ether. Or, stuff like automatic taxes, or, interesting, complicated transactions that is not possible to do in outside of the request network. And these extensions, they get incentivized by getting a cut of the rec tokens that is being used in the transaction. So it's a good business idea to make these extensions. And then, as I said, Request has a $30 million fund which it will put into and invest in these projects. That's the extension layer. Let's talk about the application layer. The application layer is stuff that is outside of the blockchain. So remember that I said today invoicing is done with PDFs? PDFs are very hard to analyze. But if these companies do invoices using request network, those invoices are much easier to analyze. And that could be an example of the application layer. A company that makes data analysis and looks at where are you paying, what are you doing with your money, stuff that many companies today have no idea what exactly is going on. And Request will add a reputation layer on top of this, and to which is basically a system, a rating system for different applications, saying that, oh, if this application behaves badly, if this application tries to trick people, then it loses in the reputation layer, which will decrease the scamming, which is a great thing. So in summary, Request wants to be the payment platform for cryptocurrencies. And remember the two problems that it wanted to solve. It wants to solve first the fees in today's transactions, and it does this by using cryptocurrencies, which doesn't have to use banks, and thus decreasing the price of the fees. And secondly, Request Network wants to change accounting forever and make accounting cheaper and faster. And it does this by using digital invoicing that is transparent, that you can check exactly what was going on in transaction, basically receipts on the blockchain. That's what Request wants to do. Now let's look at the team. What are the team doing? A first notice when you look at Request Network is that they were part of Y Combinator. And Y Combinator is basically the most famous and best startup incubator in the world. And a startup incubator is where you basically you take your company there in order to kickstart the process of starting this company. And Y Combinator is the most famous. Y Combinator had Airbnb, Dropbox were part of Y Combinator, and so on. But we have to keep in mind that there are also many failed companies that have been part of Y Combinator, but it's still a good sign. Now, one thing that sort of puzzles me with the team is that you look at their website, Request Network, and you scroll down to the team, and what you see is that it says from the team behind Moneteers. And Moneteers, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it seems to be this company of sending money. But I have no idea whether or not this company is still running, whether or not this company is still in progress. And you scroll down and you see this part where it says speak to the humans behind Moneteers, we're here to help. You click contact us, and nothing happens, right? Nothing happens. So it seems to be that this company is not running. And then you can look at Crunchbase, which is a great website for looking into different startups. And you see the team behind Moneteers is actually very similar to the team behind Request Network. You have Etienne, Christophe, and Julien are all part of Moneteers. Then you look at Request Network, and you have Christophe, Etienne, and Julien. So it really seems like they sort of switched from Moneteers to Request Network. You also see that Moneteers was part of Y Combinator. But then if you look at the list of all Y Combinator startups, so this is the website for looking at all Y Combinator startups, and you search for Moneteers, and it doesn't seem to exist, it doesn't seem to be in the list. But if you look at Request Network, that seems to be in the YC list. So it could be that they applied as Moneteers and then they pivoted from Moneteers to Request Network. It's a little bit of a mystery in my opinion, and I would love to know more and see, are they still running Moneteers, or did they give this up after working on it for around 2 years? Anyway, let's have a look at their GitHub. So GitHub, if you don't know, is a website for tracking coding projects. It's a website where you publish your code basically. And what we can see here is that Request Network has roughly 1/10 of the commits that Ethereum have, which is, quite okay because they only have 2 developers on the team, as we can see, whereas Ethereum has 41 developers. So it's a big difference, and that's because Request Network is very young, whereas Ethereum has been working on this for quite a long time, many years. But it's important that Request Network increases the amount of code that is being published, because it's not sustainable at the slow rate they're going at right now, at least in my opinion. Now let's look at their progress, because they have been doing quite some progress. They're just around 1 year old, but they've already released their invoicing system on the testnet, which is this, and you can go check it out at app.requestnetwork. I'll link it down in the description, and you can try it out yourself if you have a MetaMask. And this basically showcases the entire digital invoicing. It's a way of you can create these requests to specific accounts on the Ethereum network, but you only can do it with Ether, and that's just the start, because Kyber Network just launched today actually, so they're gonna implement and add that to the testnet soon, I think. So they've been doing quite some good progress. Now let's look at some criticism. My first concern with Request Network is that the ambition is very high. You know, and ambition equals risk, because if there is a very ambitious project, many people will try to go and catch this big fish. And you just look at the market caps of Visa and PayPal, that's $367 billion. And the top 4 accounting firms, they had revenues of upwards $150 billion this year alone. So it's a very, very ambitious project if they want to compete with both of these companies, or all of these players. And it's also a market where I think it's sort of a winner takes all model. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's look at search. Google, for example. Google is, and search is a market where the winner takes all. And you can see that Google basically has a monopoly on search. Because if there is a search engine which is a little bit better, everyone will go and use that search engine, and then that search engine will be even better, so it's really hard for the other ones to compete. And it's the same with this type of accounting and payments, because payments is a very slow moving train, and accounting is also a very slow moving train. There's a lot of regulation, which means that basically governments will pick one version that works, and then they will go on that model. They will accept one type of payment platform, and they will and when they have picked and accepted that and added regulation around that payment platform, it will be very hard for other payment platforms to compete. So it's a matter that Request Network needs to be that payment platform that wins over all the others, and that's very hard. And the second concern is that a lot of the talk on the extension layer, about the extension layer, that's sort of stuff that Ethereum already can do, sort of. You can do smart contracts with Ethereum, and that allows for automatic payment, that allows for automatic taxes and late fees and so on. So I don't really see exactly what Request Network brings to the table. And it's also that you have other projects such as OmiseGo, which is doing what Kyber Network are doing, and a lot of competition basically. My third concern is that you have few developers in the team. You look at the team, they have only 2 developers contributing code roughly. And it's a very ambitious plan. The question is, can they actually deliver? Can they execute? The ideas are not hard, the hard part is executing. And you look at the white paper, and then there's actually quite little technical details of how things are going to be done. But that's hard to know, whether or not they did that on purpose. Maybe they want to communicate easily. So let's try to answer these critiques. So ambition, sure, it equals risk, but it also equals reward. I mean, if they are able to go into the accounting market and take over, basically, that would be a massive, massive market cap of upwards $100+ billion easily. So, of course, that would be interesting. And Ethereum, sure, they can do a lot of these stuff, but Ethereum is sort of an everything machine. And Request wants to do just one thing well. And it's also that Request uses Ethereum in part of their, so it's sort of in part of their project. So it's sort of Request is one layer on top of Ethereum, and Ethereum is maybe too complicated and too raw to use, whereas Request will have these great tools for making payments. And it's also that one thing I see with Request, which is very interesting, is they value user experience, they value design, they value simplicity. And that is something that a lot of cryptocurrencies lack or miss. They sort of focus on, the other projects focus on the complicated stuff, the technology, and they sort of take technology for a sake in itself. That's never gonna work, because you have to understand the user and you have to do what the user wants. It doesn't matter if it's a very advanced technology. It matters only that you can deliver the wants of the user, right? And their alpha testnet was an example of that. It's a very easy and cool little project, and you should look into it. You should try the alpha testnet if you want to invest. And it's also, you know, for all the critiques, all the pessimism, it's very difficult to know what's going to happen, because Request is so young. It's almost just 1 year old. And for anything that's that young, and also, you know, cryptocurrencies overall is very young, there's been very little mainstream adoption. It's so hard to know what's going to happen. And that sort of summarizes my entire perspective on this project, is that it's very interesting, but it's way too early to tell. As I said, accounting and payments is a very slow-moving beast, and it's gonna take 10 years to know whether or not they succeeded. It could go much faster than that to know whether or not they failed, but to understand if they succeeded, it's gonna take at least 10 years, because that is the moment when governments will start to add regulation around using blockchain, in auditing and so on. I think people generally tend to be way too optimistic when it comes to deadlines, especially in payments. So it's gonna take a long time before we see changes in accounting and auditing. But anyway, that was my little overview of Request Network. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I didn't say any bullshit. Feel free to comment if you have any critique on me or my views on Request. My name is Alfred, and I'm a software developer. I'm a student of economics and computer science, and I hope to see you on the next video. Thanks!